Hello, I'm Jim O'Brien, and today I'm excited for this video, to do this video for you guys, because it is the first of what we hope to be a series on gun cleaning. And Dennis and/or myself are going to be choosing firearms that we may or may not have that we think are super cool for whatever reasons we have, to show you how to clean from start to finish. And we may not show you the solvent hard at work or the drying times and this and that. So there may be a little editing in the mix, but our overall plan is to walk you through start to finish on how to do basic field stripping to get your firearms clean. And when, at least for me, when I show you what I do, it's just how I clean. You may have something different, or if you've never cleaned before, feel free to model after me or go do some more research and figure out what works best for you, as well as products. And again, we have no affiliation and we don't get paid for any of the products we might happen to use in any of these videos. So I want to get that out of the way up front. We wanted to put together, ultimately, I think our goal is, I think it's safe to say our goal would be to have at least a small library of firearm cleaning firearm models that may have been done before, but if not, we may be a stop for seeing how some firearms get cleaned. And so when I was thinking about putting together this series, I was obviously having to come up with what's the very first firearm that I want to clean and show folks, and where to begin. But I almost immediately went with this. So without further ado, the firearm that I wanted to show you how to clean properly, how to field strip and clean properly, is my Ruger P85 Mark II 9mm. She's special. And the reason why she's special is, and I don't want to date myself here, but I bought this P85 Mark II brand new in 1991. And if I paid a penny over $300 for it, it was with tax. I don't think I paid $300 for it. Brand new in 1991, so a while back. And I've put quite a few rounds through it. And so the last several years, suffice it to say, she's become a bit of a safe queen, but I'm okay. I couldn't think of a better pistol, a better firearm of any sort for me personally. And there was a couple in there to consider, but I couldn't think of an overall better firearm to start with than this Ruger P85 Mark II. So the P85 happens to designate the year that the pistol was designed, as I understand it. I don't think the P85 actually came into production until 1987. And don't hold me to the dates because I'm terrible with dates in general. I'm doing good to remember my own birth date. But the number designation is the year it was designed. The Mark II came out a little bit later. I want to say the Mark II came out in 88, maybe 89. And we'll talk more about that here in a minute. Well, I mean, the simple story is that the P85 initially had some safety issues with the decocker, and we'll show you more of that when we do up close while we're cleaning. The decocker in the original P85, as I understand the story goes, when you decocked the weapon, there was apparently a risk of the hammer falling so hard that it would strike the firing pin, which would then strike the primer of the round. And apparently that happened at least one time. So a couple of things happened. They went back and fixed all of the safety issues with the weapon, and therefore created the Mark II. So there was the original P85, which was designed in 85 and came out around 87. Then there was the Mark II that came out a little bit later, fixing the safety issues. And while the original P85 was blued, you could now get stainless steel, plain stainless steel with the P85 Mark II. So that's just a little bit of history. In 84, the military had their competition again and they were trying to find a replacement for the M1911 A1, the M1911 A1 mouthful, which was a 45 auto, as you may or may not know. And so the Ruger stood a chance to compete against that and win potentially. But that particular competition, as I understand, was in '84, and this thing wasn't even finished being designed because they wanted to get it right, or as right as they thought they could. It wasn't even finished up until '85. So they lost that opportunity. They lost that they weren't able to get to the competition and lost that bid. Subsequently, it was Beretta with their 92, and I can't remember what model of 92 it was, or what trim line of 92 it was, that won, which ultimately became, for the military, the Beretta M9. But this thing met all the criteria, even then, for potentially winning that competition in '84. It just didn't make it out in time. And it met all the criteria, including having a 20,000 round service life. So they knew this thing was going to be a tough one to go up against. They just couldn't get it done. But it's a beefcake. It's cast carbon steel slide. All the metal pieces inside are stainless steel except for the extractor and the slide, which are both carbon steel cast. And then there's an investment cast aluminum frame. So you kind of got this heavy light thing going on, similar to polymers today. Now, the early P series obviously didn't have the polymer, even though at a distance this might look like it. It wasn't until the later P series, the P94s, P95s, that got a polymer, a fiberglass reinforced polyurethane frame, but these early day models had the cast aluminum. And there's been some complaints on accuracy. That was another thing that I think they tried to address with the Mark II P85. Is I've read some things about the early P85s. They may not have been as accurate as some folks felt like they should have been. But again, we have to remember this is supposedly Ruger's first foray into semi-automatic center-fired pistol. So the Mark II addressed some of the accuracy. I can say firsthand, having shot this gun quite a bit, to me it's accurate. Now, is it the most accurate competition pistol out there? No, it's not for competition, right? This thing was originally designed for military, law enforcement applications, and then, of course, the civilian market. And I know what you're thinking. Of course, I know it's empty, but treat every gun as if it were loaded at all times. The magazine is out, and if you've seen my other videos, you know that I talk about when I work on a firearm of any sort, or I clean them, I don't even have ammunition or magazines in the same room where I'm working. So just to be clear, show you on camera, I'm going to rack the slide a few times. I'm going to lock it in place. I'm going to look down into the chamber. I see it's clear. There's no magazine. I can confirm that this firearm is safe, and it's also unsafe and the hammer's down. So just to get that out of the way. So yeah, it had a nice, it had a nice combination of heavy on top, lighter on the bottom. And as we know, the weight, the additional weight, some people complain about its bulkiness. This thing comes in right at about 2 pounds, including one 15-round empty magazine. It comes in right around 2 pounds, so a little hefty, and you can also see it's a little blocky too. But we know that that extra weight helps with recoil mitigation, and anytime we can mitigate that recoil or keep that recoil somewhat trimmed down, it helps overall with handling of the firearm. And one of the things that weight does too, because it helps mitigate the recoil, is it helps with accuracy. The extra weight I have found always to help with accuracy because it mitigates the recoil. And so not only does that help with overall accuracy, but it helps with follow-up shots as well. So just a couple of notes there. So I don't know about you, I'm excited to get started. We'll talk a little bit more about the details, and I'll show you some specific things about the firearms when we start to work on it. So stick around. So here we are with my Ruger P85 Mark II. You can see the MK2 marked there in the side of the slide. If I haven't said it yet, I'll say it again, even if I have. even with some of their politics that they may have gotten in some hot water for in the past, quite a while ago now, I am and always have been a big fan of Ruger. Now, do I have all Rugers? No, but I am a fan and I have a few in the collection. I think especially for their price point, they're fantastic. They're reliable, they're beefy, they're generally very accurate. And like every other firearm, they're a lot of fun to shoot, I've got to say. And the time or two that I've needed them, and fortunately, you know, I think with modern firearms, it's a rarity that you do, but you know, the time or two that I've needed them over the years, their customer service has been outstanding for me. With only a week or two turnaround, there was one revolver I had to send back to them, and they had it back to me, I think, in a week and a half. So fortunately, I haven't had to deal with their customer service a whole lot. But again, the time or two that I have, fantastic, quick turnaround, issues addressed, fixed, no fuss, no muss. So as I mentioned, this is the 9mm. As the P series progressed, they actually created a 40 caliber and a 45 auto. This was the 9mm, which was, as I mentioned, a 15-in-1. Just to talk through some things now that we're looking at it up close. Obviously a hammer-fired weapon, not a striker. It is both single and double action, so meaning that you can pull the trigger, you know, to cock the hammer back, or you can fire it with the hammer back, and like any other hammer-fired semi-automatic, every time the slide reciprocates, the hammer is recocked again. It has the ambidextrous safety and decocker on it, so just by pushing down on the decocker safety lever, you can see maybe the white paint in there. It's now safe, and the hammer's been decocked. There are really three things kind of happening with the weapon when it gets decocked to put on to safe. If the hammer is back, you saw that, that's the decocking part. So the hammer falls as the first one of the steps that happens when you decock it. The firing pin actually rolls or cams out of the way of the hammer, so the hammer doesn't hit it, or has less of a chance of hitting it, I guess, in fairness maybe. And I think that was probably the main fix they did over the P85 when they did have that safety issue. So the firearm moves out of the way of the hammer when it gets decocked. And then the third thing that, as I understand, happens when you decock the weapon is that the trigger disengages from the sear. So, you know, there's a pretty good chance that it's not going to fire when you decock it now. So you can see it says safe here when it's in the decock position. You can see the white paint down in there, as opposed to when it's on fire. There's nothing on the slide indicating the word fire by comparison, but you can see maybe down in the hole now you're seeing red, which generally with any firearm, red is fire and white is safe. So that's how that works. The other thing that is ambidextrous on this weapon is, you'll notice right here the magazine release. And honestly, I don't know of any other firearm, at least in today's market, that is quite the same as this. You know, I think it's safe to say most semi-automatics have a push button mag release. The HKs, of course, or a lot of the HKs, some of them have push buttons too, but a lot of the HKs also have the paddles, which are on either side of the back of the trigger guard, and you push down on those paddles on the H and Ks. But with the trigger, with the Ruger, you're actually going to push forward on this mag release, and it doesn't matter. If you're holding the weapon, you can push it forward with your thumb on this side, if you're right-handed, or you can push it forward with your index finger. I know some have said they have to change the position of the gun to reach the release with their thumb. I think that's true with a lot of firearms of a certain size and a certain size hand, but in this case, I don't have any problem either side. But it is an ambidextrous mag release. As I mentioned, the slide, as well as the extractor, which I'll show you here in a minute, are carbon steel. The slide is cast carbon steel, so some heft to it. Ruger apparently is into casting quite a bit, and they designed this gun to be cast built, and they've done it very well. It's very rugged. Cast doesn't always get a good rep, but there's like 4 different types of casting, and the investment casting that they've done with this firearm is a very tough casting method for aluminum or otherwise. And in fact, things like surgical tools and even turbine props get made by the investment cast method because of the strength that it can generate. So not a problem there. The frame again is cast aluminum. And then you probably see here that the grip inserts are actually some sort of polymer or plastic. Now, Ruger did do a polymer frame later on in the P series. I think by the 95s they were polymer, and they were doing a fiberglass reinforced polyurethane. But this is the aluminum. And again, I think the beefiness of this gun only helps with this accuracy. And again, the Mark II was probably a little bit improved upon over the original P85. You probably see my gaudy, they're not gaudy, but they serve a purpose. The only modification I ever did with this pistol is I slid this Rogue grip over it because it added some grip to the grip, some more grip to the grip. And it added the finger grooves, which at the time I thought was pretty cool, but it does help with grip. Plus the rubber has some tackiness to it. So for me, it really helped with the beef up the grippiness of the plastic inserts that they used on this grip. Probably the biggest complaint besides its typical, besides its blockiness and whatnot, and I'm trying to show you here, may not be doing it too well, but the sight dots, both the front and rear sights, are not the biggest in the world. You'll notice those rear sight dots are relatively small, but it's fine. You see them just fine if your eyes are in good working order. But again, to me, it certainly didn't impact accuracy. I find this gun to be extremely accurate. And again, it has to do with the weight, certainly, or at least partially. And you know, again, I love Rugers, always have. Politics aside, are they the sexiest guns? No. Are they a lot of frills? No. But they're effective, reliable, and relatively inexpensive in the overall scheme of things. So I've blabbed enough. I could probably go on and on about this little 9mm. So let's tear it down and get it ready to clean. But before we do that, just to kind of walk you through what I've got here, it's really simple what I do for the most part. Unless a firearm is super, super dirty, this is about all I do with it. So first of all, I moved away from rods years ago, and I moved towards the bore snake. And I'll just show you real quick. I covered this in another video on cleaning guns, but the bore snake works by pulling it through the barrel, through the bore. It has embedded copper wiring here in the rope, if you will, to help break up the carbon and gunpowder and lead and all that good stuff down in the barrel. And you pull this thing through, well, you can pull it through however many times you like, but I think the recommended number is something like 10. You pull this thing through the barrel 10 times and your barrel's pretty much clean. If it's not, pull it through a couple more times. But I'm a big believer in these bore snakes. I haven't punched a barrel or a bore with a rod in years. I highly recommend these. Again, I don't have any affiliation with Hopies or anyone else that might create this particular bore snake or any brand that would be comparable or similar to this, but a big fan. Of course, I have a rag that I use multi-purpose. You may opt to have 2 or 3 rags for the different agents that you're cleaning the gun with. I just use the one until it gets so dirty. I don't worry about washing. It's all nasty with gunpowder and everything else. I just throw them out and use another one. So you definitely want to have some good microfiber cloths on hand. The other thing that I might have, and this screws into a handle. I don't have the handle right now, but I've got a few of these nice plastic or nylon bristled brushes. They come really in handy. I don't think we're going to have to use it on this gun today because it's actually, I put it away clean, so it's fairly clean. I just wanted to take you through the process. But having yourself some brushes like this, again, plastic, or I think this is a nylon. I prefer the stiffer bristled over the softer bristles, just because if you've got stubborn stains and need to go to brush, you need a brush that'll actually break them up. And of course, they make wire and copper wire brushes too for those really stubborn stains. The other things that I may or may not need to get down in the nooks and crannies is I got myself a set of bamboo chopsticks, which can work nice. And then they do make these, they're actually a little bit pointier, even pointier than chopsticks, but they make these nice brass cleaning rods to help you get down into the corners and nooks and crannies even better. So again, probably won't have to use these today, but I just want to show you what I normally get out. And then what do I clean with? Well, like I talked about a little bit in our gun cleaning video, which wasn't focused on any firearms in particular. It was just focused on how do we clean, some products to use. As I've become, for a number of years now, a big fan of frog lube. So I use the liquid, and we'll walk through the process of using all this. And again, no affiliation or payment involved. This is just my opinion and my preferences. I got the liquid frog lube, which I typically use more for lubricating points, contact points on the firearms. We got the paste, which will show you how to heat up the metal and paint this on and give it time to set up. And then the first stage that we'll be walking through is spraying on and using the solvent. So with that, we're going to get started now. So how do you break down one of these old Ruger P85s? Well, like every time you want to break down a weapon, you want to make sure it is indeed empty, it's clear. And so again, the magazine's out, and you can pretty easily tell down in the chamber there's nothing there, and I'll take my finger just in case. So what's the first step? And it's still on fire, doesn't really matter so long as the key point is that before you start cleaning, you make sure your weapon is clear. So down in here, you'll see hopefully right there, my finger's touching it. Let me see if I can get in here with the light and maybe the pointer. So right there is the part of the extractor. And so what we want to do with that is we want to take our finger, and on that tab that I was just pointing to right there, hopefully the light will allow you to see it, is I'm going to push that down. With this particular model, and there's other firearms out there that have a similar step that you need to take. If you don't take this step and push that extractor down out of the way, the slide will not go forward and come off. So that's the important, next to clearing the weapon, that's the first step in breaking down the weapon, is pushing that extractor down. After that, you have your slide stop. And you'll see me, you'll hear me reference the right-hand side of the slide stop. That's this button here. And all that is the rod that the slide stop works off of comes through and out the other side. So when I tell you to push on that, that's what we're talking about there. So just to show you that now. So this is the slide stop. Now that I got the extractor down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the gun firmly in both of my hands. And I want to keep the palm of my hands and my fingers out of this chamber here, because the recoil spring is under quite a bit of a tension on this firearm, or any firearm when you're getting ready to clean it. If this slide slams home, it's going to pinch something and not going to feel real good. So I try to keep my hands completely out of the way of that. So what I'm going to do now is the slide stops in the slide stop notch on the frame, and I'm just going to show you that real quick. So that's the slide stop notch. So all we're doing to lock the slide back is moving it to that position and then pushing up on it, and you can see how it catches there, pushing up to make sure it catches. Now to get the slide off and my extractors down, what I'm going to do is hold it in both my hands, one on the grip, one on the slide. I'm going to push slightly back on the slide to relieve the tension on the slide stop. And then I'm going to let that slide stop come forward until this little rounded hole is in line with the back arm on the slide stop. Okay? And you just kind of have to feel for it. And that button on the back side that I told you to push, once it gets in line, and you won't really see it, but as you begin to push on that back button, you'll see how that pops out. See that? So let me show you from up top. So as you begin to push out on that, that'll come out enough where you can grab hold of it, pull it all the way out, twist it forward, get it out of the way, and now you want to bring the slide forward. And it can be, some firearms can be a little stiff like you saw on that. Ooh, a piece of lint, that's never good. But again, this has been sitting in my safe for, quite honestly, a number of years. So it's good that we're cleaning it today. And that's a good point too, is that even though you've cleaned your firearms and you've had them in the safe for a long time, you should get them out and inspect them once in a while and clean them. So you can see this actually needs a bath, so it's a good thing we're doing that. So we have now separated the slide from the frame. You can see the extractor better now is down. The slide stops pulled back. This is the rod here that's moving that came through the other side, as you see right there. That's all the way out now. And then we have our slide. So the next step is we need to get the barrel out. And this part's really easy. So the first thing we're going to do is take out the recoil spring. And it's kind of, well, it's not kind of, it is seated in front of this piece here of the barrel. And so when you want to push forward on it slightly to get it away from that, so that it can break contact, and then it's going to come back. And you want to hold on to this because, again, that spring is still under tension and you don't want it to shoot because your recoil spring rod may go flying across the room and you may lose your spring for a few minutes until you can find it again. So now we've got the slide rod and the recoil spring out. And then the next thing we're going to do, and all I do is move it forward a little bit and then kind of pull up and back to get the barrel out. And you can see that shiny stainless steel barrel on this thing. So that's that. That's the inside. That's what the inside of the slide looks like on this particular firearm. Still on safe, doesn't really matter now. One thing I'll say about firearms in general, pistols in general, is you never want to really soak this area back here or the hole where the firearm punches through to strike the cartridge. It's really good to keep the firearm as dry as possible. It's not to say we can't spray stuff down in here, which we'll do here in a second, but you don't want to drench the firing pin. You actually want to keep the firing pin and the firing pin area mostly dry. But with that, we'll get some spray going here. I'm just going to get the Frog Lube solvent. Sorry for hitting the camera there. And I'm just going to spray down in here. And again, it's okay to get some of it in there, right? But I just want to spray down everything real good if I can keep from hitting the camera over and over again. And we're just going to let this stuff sit for a few minutes. And so we're going to pause and take a break while this stuff has enough time to sit. Depending on how dirty your gun is, right, or how dirty it's not. Like this one isn't too bad. But if it's super dirty or if there's a lot of stuff caked up in there, you're going to want to let this solvent sit for a little bit before you wipe it down. And you may even need to spray some more before you wipe it down. Or after you get it wiped down, you may need to spray it some more to break up all the gunks in there. So I'm going to stop here, let this stuff sit, and then we'll come back and pick up where we left off. So the solvent's sat now for a bit, and so all I'm doing is now I've given the solvent time to hopefully eat off all the grime and build up from shooting or leaving it in the safe over the years, whatever it is. Hopefully the solvent's done its job. Again, if it hasn't, after you get through wiping it down, nothing says you can't go through the process again and spray it all down again, let it sit and do its work, and then wipe it all off again. It may take you a couple of times if you find that you find your gun is super dirty or super caked up with old grease or whatever. As a matter of fact, I think in part, even though this firearm hasn't been shot in a while, I think in part some of the caked upness is probably my old rig grease just sitting over here in time. So again, even if you don't pull your firearms out and shoot them regularly, you should pull them out once in a blue moon and giving them an inspection, a once over, and then consider giving them a good bath. Keeping them clean certainly doesn't hurt anything. And then, like I said, from a safety perspective, the next time you go to shoot them, you know they're clean and ready to go, if nothing else. So We've let the solvent sit. Now I'm just wiping this down, and I may blather on some stories as we go, because again, I want to show you the process, and so that's what we're here to do. And so if you don't want to watch me do all this or hear me blather on, feel free to fast forward to the next thing we get to, but we're going to work on the slide here some. We're basically just wiping off all the residue solvent, because we certainly don't want any of that liquid left in here over time. We want to get it wiped down and dried off, but obviously the main point of this is now that the solvent's gone to work and broken down all the crud and grime and gunpowder and lead, whatever carbon buildup, that's what we're actually trying to wipe off. And again, this firearm was in pretty good shape overall, just because I haven't shot it in a while, but we're doing some good at getting it cleaned up. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the fact that this was my very first pistol of any sort, I had shot my dad has a Ruger, interestingly enough, no surprises, a Ruger Security 6 357 Magnum, and it's just a blast to shoot, so to speak. And so I had shot pistols before of different sorts. I think I'd even shot an old Colt 1911 that a high school buddy of mine had, but this was the first pistol, and I remember buying it, and I remember the exact shop. There was a gun store down just south of the Atlanta airport. For those of you in the area, you might remember back in the day which one I'm talking about. I won't mention their name because I think they've long since been gone anyway, but right there off of, what was that, 75 and 285, somewhere around that area, there was a gun shop there. Had a shop and a firing range, and I remember the day I bought this gun. I remember the shop. I remember my same buddy from high school and I going to the range that they had at the shop and shooting there regularly, all the time. In fact, we had memberships. We shot so much. Moving on to the barrel now. I think I've wiped the slide down about all I can. Now, right now, the barrel's kind of a two-step thing, so to speak, every time, because not only do I need to wipe down all the crap off the outside of the barrel, but I also need to punch the barrel, as they say. I need to clean down in the barrel, and you can kind of see, and again, it's not super dirty. But anyway, I want to wipe down the outside. Doesn't matter what order. In fact, I'm going a little bit backwards than what I normally do personally. On my firearms, I usually clean out the barrel first, punch the bore first before wiping it down. But this time we're doing it backwards. It doesn't really matter. So now that I've got the, we'll go ahead and do that now. We'll let the frame sit a little bit longer because it does seem to have some gunk. Of course, you want to wipe down your spring. There's not a whole lot about that you can do. In this case, we can take the guide rod out and wipe it down as well, but it's not too bad. None of this is too bad. Put that back in there. So what do we want to do with this barrel? Well, we want to make sure it's clean. I mean, arguably next to the actions and all of this going on here in the frame, the barrel's the most important thing, right? And it needs to be clean and free of obstructions. And so I typically don't have to worry about obstructions too much, but I still have to worry about keeping my barrels clean. And like I said, I converted over to this, to the bore snake method some time ago now. I can't even remember the last time I used the pads and rod to punch my bores to clean them out. But what I like to do is, again, I'm using frog lube. So, your solvent, your CLPs might be different, but I like to take the liquid frog lube, and it's more like almost a gel, a viscous liquid, and you can kind of see there, hopefully, what it's like. That's too much. That's okay. We'll wind up using it somehow. And so what I do is I work from the chamber end of the barrel to the front end of the barrel, just the way I do it. If somebody knows the exact scientific reason why that might be preferred over the going in from the end of the barrel, let us know in the comments below. But I'm just going to feed that snake through there I meant to show you that. I'll show you next time. And then pull it through. And that is about as hard as it gets. So I'm taking the end, which has a stamp of the size of the bore snake, which matches up to the caliber. You know, what I'm trying to say is the bore snakes are built to the size caliber that you need to clean. But I'm taking this metal end and this paracord bit of the snake and pulling it all the way through. And then those embedded brushes are scraping that barrel down. And then I'm just going to do this a few times. And we won't spend a lot of time because, again, I haven't shot this gun in a while. I'm just punching the barrel while we're cleaning. I don't want to not do it. That would be silly. Got the gun torn down and not do the barrel. Plus, we're sure now that it's clean. And I don't think the last time I cleaned this gun I used frog lube. If I did, I don't remember. So this is a good time to convert over to the frog lube method and the frog lube purposes. I think if you were to try frog lube, you'd like it, but there's so many, dare I say, quality or good solvents and CLPs on the market today. I don't know that you could go wrong with too many of them. There are some more well-known names than others, but I don't think you can go wrong. So I don't know how many times this is. Like I said, usually 10's enough, even with a pretty dirty barrel. And that's looking pretty good down in there. You can see the walls are shiny. And that's the thing that I like about this frog lube for cleaning out the barrel is not only does it clean out everything with these bore snakes and the frog lube, it leaves a thin coating behind. And so it's cleaning the barrel, it's lubricating the barrel, and it's protecting the barrel. And you know, it's not that the bullets slip through any better, although I guess on some micro level maybe, but it's getting a thin coating of protection in there too. This is another reason why you want to keep your barrels clean, especially with a good CLP or lubricant of some sort, is that it makes it easier to clean the next time because it does have a good coating of stuff in there. So that's all it is. You know, 10 times with a bore snake, maybe more, maybe less, and you're good to go. So now that I've wiped down the barrel and I've cleaned out the barrel, wiped the barrel down and cleaned it out, we're good to go. And you know, it's important to clean up the ramp, the feed ramp to the barrel here too, and the end of the chamber. So I'm just doing it here to show you, but make sure you've gotten that barrel because this feed ramp, because the feed ramps get super, super dirty. So you want to keep the chamber, the entrance, the chamber super clean too. So we'll move on to the frame. And you can see there's some gunk in here. Maybe you can't, but it doesn't matter. We're going to get ready to clean it all off. Give it a good wipe down and give it some love for the first time in a number of years. So yeah, I was telling you that my buddy from high school, he probably won't mind me mentioning his name, Tony. We go way back. And he and I forget what he was shooting at the time. I think he was shooting one of his dad's Colt. I do remember he was shooting a Colt 1911 from time to time, and then seems to me that he would bring one of his dad's Colt 357 revolvers to the range. And he and I would meet up there pretty regularly and shoot on the range. And, you know, I was young, and like many youngsters, I wasn't like super into firearms back then like I am now by comparison, I guess you'd say. Not that I'm a gun nut, but you know what I mean, hopefully. But, you know, I was Joe Cool, and it was my first pistol, and I was shooting so much, I bought a membership to the place, an annual membership to the place, and yada, yada, yada. And I did a couple of silly things like youngsters do on occasion, and, you know, I guess I didn't know any better, or maybe I thought I was cool, or maybe I didn't even know any better, you know, but I had this old pair of mesh weightlifting, fingerless weightlifting gloves. You know, it had probably the fake pleather palm, and then it had the mesh backing, and then the fingers only came to your first knuckle. And you know, the Wimp's weightlifting gloves, as some say. And I think I did actually wear those in the gym sometime back in the day, but that's a different story. Anyway, I'd go in and shoot with those gloves, which now is obviously laughable to me anyway. And then the other silly thing I did, because I wasn't carrying back then, I wasn't even considering carrying all that time back then, is, and I didn't know any better. I wound up buying I guess it was like a heavier denier or Cordura nylon holster. But the fun part, and you'll appreciate this maybe, or maybe you'll laugh at me and make memes about it, is that it was a shoulder holster. So I think it may have had magazine pouches under my right arm, but because I'm right-handed, the firearm, the holster itself was under my left arm. And you know, I never, because I wasn't carrying, I didn't have a permit, and we have to have permits here in Georgia to carry concealed at least. You know, it wasn't like I was going around town with a shoulder holster on. But if I went to the firing range, I'd get that. Of course, that was the holster I kept this gun in at the time. If I went to the firing range, I'd put that shoulder holster on and use it there. And I don't remember practicing and drawing. I think we're looking pretty good here. I'm going to move the extractor up. So see, I can move the extractor freely. I just have to make sure it's down to remove the slide. And then when we're finished with the process, I'm going to push it back up into place. But if you do pull it up to finish cleaning like I need to do here, you just want to make sure to put it back down again before you put the slide back on, because just like taking it off, you can't take it off without it down, and you can't put the slide back on without it being down. So just remember, now that we're finished wiping down in there, we're going to push it down. And look, you know, this is a point to make too. We're not taking down every single piece. We're not taking the trigger mechanism out. We're not taking the hammer out. We're not taking the firearm all the way down. We're doing what we call a basic field stripping of the weapon. And if you're curious and want a reason to read any of your firearm manuals, all the cleaning procedures and how to break them down effectively are in there. Of course, I'll caveat that with sometimes it takes a little experimentation on your own to figure it all out. Sometimes they're written better than other times, but your manual can be your friend. Safety precautions, as well as how to break it down, reassemble, and even shoot it correctly, you know, because everyone's a little bit different, especially when it comes to field stripping. So I'm going to shut my mouth now. We've got the slide cleaned up. We've got the recoil spring and guide rod cleaned. We got the barrel cleaned inside now. Now we're going to move on to the next phase of how we're going to apply this frog lube paste, which is also basically a CLP just in paste form. And frog lube is a little bit different than most others on the market in that they recommend that you heat the metal pieces of your gun before basically painting this on, which is why we have a little cheap model painter's brush, because you're going to paint this paste on and it's going to melt because the metal's been heated up. And the science behind it is that I'm sure it's not anything huge impact, make a huge difference, but the idea is that when you heat metal, the pores expand, and it allows, because the paste melts on the heat, it allows more of the CLP, the frog lube, to get down into those metal pores and actually build an even better barrier, if you would. Because again, you know, we're not just cleaning, we're wanting to protect, whether it be from weather or fingerprints. You know, the oils in our fingers can cause rust. And while we don't have to worry about rust so much with stainless steel like this is, it still needs some protection on there, and it's just good practice. So we'll go to that next. Give me just a minute, we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. We've wiped down the firearm about as best we can with the solvent. We've punched the barrel well with the liquid frog lube, and now it's time to basically get all the metal pieces coated with the frog lube paste. And so how are we going to do that? Well, they recommend heating up that metal. And so the easiest way to do it, and I guess a hair dryer on high heat for some time might work, but the easiest thing to do is go buy yourself a inexpensive heat gun. I don't even remember what I paid for this Wagner, but it was not much. And so this is what we're literally going to do, and it's going to be kind of hard to coordinate with the camera here, but I'm going to take each piece, and I recommend holding it on a rag, maybe your microfiber as I'm doing, because it is going to get hot and it's going to get loud too, so hopefully you'll be able to hear me. But I'm simply going to turn my heat gun on and heat up this metal. I'm just going to do parts at a time. Like for the slide here, I'm going to do the inside, and then I'm going to do the tops and sides and kind of break it down like that. And then if I need to recoat anything, I can. But I'm going to turn the heat gun on. I go ahead and drop it up on high so it doesn't take all day. You kind of want to move the heat gun around. You don't want to hold it too long in one place because it gets super hot and then you're going to burn your hand more than likely, even with the rag. The other caution that I'll give you, which we'll have to worry about more with the frame and the grip inserts on this gun, is you want to avoid plastic spaces, plastic things, whether it's grips, your handles, even some sights, right? You certainly want to be cautious about using heat around those. So that is a drawback or a caution that I would give you about getting a heat gun. But just to get through this, here we go. So you can see that even though it's just started, I'm still starting out in the habit of moving the barrel of the heat gun around and not holding it in the same place for any length of time at all. But what I am looking to do is get that metal, you know, hot enough that'll melt the paste, which it doesn't take much. So maybe it's more like a really warm state, but you know, it gets warm enough and you'll see my microfiber maybe start smoking a little bit because it's got a lot of stuff in it too. Nothing crazy. You know, the one thing I do like about the frog lube is it's all natural. Technically, when it's brand new, technically you could eat it. I don't recommend it, but it does have a nice peppermint taste to it. Ask me how I know. Now that I've dunked a lead dirty brush in there a few times after touching a number of firearms, I don't recommend that now, but it is a somewhat safe, non-toxic product. Ooh, that's hot. I gotta set my gun over here on the hearth. That's the other thing. Don't let your heat gun touch anything afterwards because it's hot too. And now I'm just gonna begin painting this paste all over the place. And you can see that the paste just immediately dissolves, right? Immediately. Now, when I first moved away from using Hopi's solvent and lots and lots of cotton or polyester pads, this was the biggest adjustment for me. I was like, do I really want to go through the hassle of using a heat gun and heating up parts all the time just to get a good coating on there? Well, all I can tell you is that frog lube has worked and worked very well for me. When it came out, I watched some of the demos. You know, frog lube was invented by at least one Navy SEAL or former Navy SEAL and or a couple of buddies of his. I can't remember all the stories. But I watched a couple of demos in the local gun shops, and, you know, after they got through coating it and drying it, all that good stuff, they were able to drizzle water across the firearm, you know, the slide or whatever. And that water, even after just doing this one time, and I'm not saying you do this to test me or test it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that even after getting this stuff put on here one time and going through the process, because now that we're painting it on, it's got to dry, right? It's kind of like car wax. Think of waxing your car. If you've ever waxed your car before, you put the paste on or the liquid on, and then I just keep bumping that camera, don't and then you got to let it dry to a haze. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing with this, is we're painting it on, and I think we got the inside, so we're going to move to the outside now. We're painting it on, and then it's got to dry. Kind of like I said, kind of like car wax. So now we've got the inside done. I'm going to heat out the outside. I'm not trying to be too scientific about it. Sorry, camera's just going to get killed before it's over with. But I'm just trying to heat up everything well enough to melt that paste, and then the idea again is opening up those metal pores to let that paste, when it melts, seep in. I think that's good enough. Doesn't take a whole lot. And again, be careful where you set that heat gun down, not to beat that into you too much. But again, I'm just painting this on. Feel like Bob Ross a little bit here. Fluffy, fluffy clouds. Yeah, so imagine me with mesh weightlifting fingerless gloves on, shooting this exact firearm with a black nylon shoulder holster. And if that doesn't give you a laugh, at least when it comes to firearms, I don't know what will. But again, you know, I have a lot of, I'm just coating all of this, and you can see the paste just dissolves. Getting the front of the muzzle too, the front of the slide, the sides. And look, it doesn't have to be perfect, but the better you do it, the better protection you're gonna get. Even when she's in the safe, right? But especially if you're gonna use it. So I think we've beat that slide up pretty well. I'm gonna set it over here off to the side and not in the solvent from earlier. My guide rod, gonna do the same. It's aluminum, but still gonna treat it the same, take care of it. Give everybody equal treatment. That's what we're after, right? Coat this up real quick, not super scientific. Don't have to think about it a lot, just get it covered. There we go, throw it down. I'm not gonna bother heating the spring, but I'm even gonna get some on the spring, right? Just gonna coat it up. And when I get everything painted up with this paste, we're gonna let it set, and I'm not gonna keep you for that. We'll cut away again until we come back to wipe it all down. We wanna get it coated up, which is what I'm staying on here for. And then once it's had time to dry, we want to wipe it all down, and then we'll almost be done. So we're going to do the barrel next, and then we'll have the frame, and we'll wrap this job up. I have to say too that this process that we're going through with this particular product is probably not something I would have had the patience for back when I was younger either. But I have to say, you know, it can take some time, even using products like Hopies and cleaning pads. I mean, that whole process of putting the solvent down in the barrel, giving it a minute or two to break anything loose that might be in there, which you know it's going to be if you've been shooting, and then having to punch the bore time and time again with multiple pads in the rod until they come out clean. You know, that's a time-consuming process too. So I don't know which one's shorter. I will say, short of just punching a barrel real quick and wiping everything off down and dirty, which would take all of 5 to 10 minutes, and you can do that from time to time without a filled strip. But I'm going to recommend that you do filled stripping fairly regularly, and we talked about some of that in the other video we did on gun cleaning. But I'm going to say on average, aside from just quickly punching out the bore and giving everything a quick wipe down, which you could really do while you're still at the range after you get through shooting every time, you know, cleaning a gun is probably a good 30-minute to an hour-long ordeal. I say ordeal, it's really not. But, you know, it takes some time. You got to set aside a Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening. I think that barrel's coated up to do it, because, you know, 30 minutes to an hour per firearm. And, you know, some firearms can be a little bit more persnickety to break down than others. So yeah, it takes some time to field strip them and get them to the point of getting them good and clean. So now we're doing the frame. If this was a polymer frame, I'd want to be careful about ensuring that I'm primarily focused on the metal parts and not the polymer itself. I'm not sure how much heat polymer can withstand, but with this being cast aluminum, we're okay here for the most part. I'm still moving the heat gun around as I'm doing this, and we'll do the inside and outside in 2 waves, kind of like we did the slide. The only thing I want to be take particular note of with this firearm is these grip inserts, right? These plastic grip inserts, and of course my rubber Hogue grip overlay, but we're not going to be too concerned about that. I don't think we're going to get very close to it overall. But I do want to heat up the metal that I can easily get to. I think that's good enough. And you can see, while it takes a little bit of time, this is not like a hugely tedious or taxing activity or process. It just takes a little time. But you know what they say, it takes time to get things done right. And so, you know, I'm not going to say that I enjoy cleaning all my firearms. Some of them can be, like I said, kind of persnickety in how you got to break them down and put them back together, but it's not bad. And I know that I like knowing the before and after, you know, getting them to the point where they're clean again. I like seeing that before and after. It's kind of like mowing grass. Do I like mowing grass? I'd like to be doing other things, but I do enjoy the sense of accomplishment. And then the other thing I was going to say, for me at least, is I enjoy taking care of myself. So while the love may not be in the labor itself, I do take pride in my things, and I do like doing things for myself and taking care of myself. That was something my dad taught me growing up, and that's one thing that he taught me that may have actually stayed with me. Is I'm not super OCD about it, but I do believe in taking care of your stuff, and I take pride in doing it for myself. And so I guess this falls into that category. Plus I do shoot a lot, so it's important that I keep my firearms clean. So you can see I'll probably move this extractor up. That wasn't the best way to do that, but I'm coating all these surfaces as best I can, even down into the mag well. I want to get the front face or the downside, depending on if it's up and down, of the extractor here too. Anything that's metal. I'm not trying to paint polymer or plastic, although it's not going to hurt it to get a coat of wax, so to speak, with this frog lube that we happen to be using today. I'm going to go ahead and do some of this outside too, because I think it's warm enough to melt the paste. Speed things up a little bit here, but you can just see that I'm trying to make it a point to get as much as everything metal as I possibly can. And if you overlap some plastic or some polymer, this stuff will wipe off. I don't think, and you know, don't hold me to this because I don't know for sure, I'm no chemist or scientist, but I don't think there's anything that frog lube you would paint. Like I've even got some here on the grip inserts, right? Like I don't think there's anything that you could get frog lube onto that it's going to stain or ruin. I mean, don't hold me to that. I can't say that I've any proof of it not staining. I've cleaned a lot of firearms with this stuff, and I don't think I've ever had any issues. So don't feel like you got to paint all within the lines. Just keeping the heat gun or the hair dryer or whatever you have away from the plastic is the best policy to have. So with that, I'm going to set the paste aside. I'm going to give our parts all a chance to dry. What we're looking for, again, much like car wax, is a milky, dry haze. And that's the point that we know that it's done, it's doing its job, it's done its job, it's sunk in about as good as it's going to, it's bonded to the metal about as good as it's going to. And so I'm going to cut away and just give it some time, and we'll be back to clean this thing up. Stick around. And we're back. So we've given it a bit of time. I have to say, ideally, maybe not as much time as I normally would like to. So I'm going to try to show you on the frame here. So, you know, the painting of the paste, as I'll call it, can take some time. The idea, again, is the best analogy I can come up with is car wax, right? And so you saw I painted it on, it was liquid by the time it hit the hot metal. And you can kind of see here where it's starting to haze over and thicken up. And that's what you're looking for. That's what you want. The barrel is a little tougher to see because it's shiny metal, but you can see, you know, it's still starting to haze up, which is a good thing. Even on the slide, we did it first, and so it's had more time than everything else, and you can see it kind of thickening up. And so, you know, one thing that I'll say about the paste, and then we'll get to, matter of fact, I'll work while we talk, is that the thicker that you paint on the paste, which is not a bad thing, because again, you're putting on that protective layer, you don't want to overdo it, and there's really no need to. But if you do happen to paint on the paste fairly thick, and I think it's safe to say I did earlier, multitasking and painting frog lube paste on, if the more you cake on, it makes sense that it's going to take longer to dry, right? And it's kind of like car wax, not to beat that horse again and again, but it's kind of like car wax. If you cake it on, which is why they say not to, it can take much more time to dry, and then it's going to be much harder to wipe off. And of course, that's not the case with frog lube, because this stuff, as you'll see, will wipe off pretty easily. But the good news is I think it's solidified enough and is filming over enough that we don't have to worry about it. It's suffice it to say, I think there's plenty of protection in the coating that we have on here. And so I'm wiping these parts off in no particular order. I'm just kind of grabbing and going. I'm losing some of my light in here with the windows being open, so I want to take advantage of that while I can. With this daylight savings thing, it's killing us in the evening, isn't it? But anyway, now that we've painted the paste on everything metal, we've really got a good protective coating on here. And this is what it's going to protect it from the elements. It's going to protect it better from our fingerprints. And look, I'm not a spokesperson for anybody, and I'm not going to claim that it's impervious from finger oils and it's impervious from rain. I'm not going to make any of those claims. I'm not anybody that could do that, but it is important we get the protective coating on here well, so it can better protect against the things it's supposed to. And if nothing else, because it's protected, it'll be easier to clean off the next time. So that's another reason why we want to clean our firearms regularly, is over time these protectants can have a little bit of buildup in time, and so that's just going to help us maintain the metal and keep it protected from all the things it's supposed to. So that's done. I'm going to go ahead and do the slide now. It's had plenty of time to cake up. Yeah, you can see the dry, well, hopefully you can see the haze that's formed. So that's when you know this stuff's ready to come off. And you're not wiping everything you put on back off again. No, you're just wiping off the excess and leaving behind that protective coating, which is what we want. Again, guess what it's like? You got it, car wax. So whether you wax your cars or not, hopefully you get the analogy and the similarities. So we've got a good protective coating on there. Now we're just wiping off the excess, because we don't want that getting all over everything. Plus there's no reason for all that excess. And so if it is extra thick in the case of this paste that we're using, it just means you got to wipe off a little bit more. And if it hasn't completely dried, all the way like this may not have, because we did jump on it for the sake of getting the video done. We did jump on it a tiny bit early. That's okay, just wipe it off. It's just a little bit more wiping to do, so that's okay. And the camera, knocking the camera is going to be the downfall of me this video. Please forgive me. I imagine that's going to happen a lot in time. I'll have to figure out a better setup. You know, and that's something else too, just to talk to fill in the space here. Dennis and I are just getting started with this video thing and, you know, the whole YouTube thing. And so we're still new. We're still learning, trying to figure out what works best. And don't be shy, you know, leave some feedback. We're open to suggestions, and I'm just trying to do some things that I know I'd like to see. One of which hopefully is showing some details that maybe other how-to videos or similar miss out on. I know when I go to look up, like even if I'm working on one of my small engines out in the garage, you know, there's a lot of great how-to videos out there, but so many of them leave out some what seem to be trivial, tiny details, but then that's the very thing you need. Like, where'd that bolt go? So I hope this video, I've talked specifically to a couple of small details that, you know, weren't necessarily apparent right off, or if they were, if you already know how to do this, then you're ahead of the game and you're just watching this to kill time. Hopefully for someone that is just starting out, they may not have a P85 Mark II from Ruger, but, you know, hopefully they get some idea of what it takes and what it's like to clean a firearm, a pistol, a semi-automatic pistol. And those basic principles apply regardless of the semi-automatic pistol. Now, many semi-automatic pistols break down and go back together in different ways, but they're still somewhat close. And so that part you might have to figure out, you know, but again, consult your manual or other videos. You know, we're not ashamed. The world's plenty big enough for extra help. So we're not ashamed. If you need to go look at what someone else did in their videos, do that too. We're just trying to provide a service here and show you some helpful, hopefully some helpful how-tos. But, you know, you can always consult your manual for the specifics of how to break down your particular firearm. But what I'm trying to say is the fundamentals of cleaning are the same, right? You got to strip all the junk off. You've got to wipe it down. You've got to clean out the inside of your barrel, most certainly. And you got to get a good coating of protectant on to protect the metal. Keep your fingerprints off. Maybe keep it a little more protected out in the weather elements if you find yourself out training outside. And then keeping moving parts and the parts that rub together protected from one another. Those are really the key points of cleaning. And so that applies across all pistols, even revolvers, and might I even say, well, I would say even rifles, because rifles is, when it comes to the cleaning bit, rifles is the same. I mean, the cleaning principles and methods are the exact same. It's just how you break down that firearm and get it back together. So I think this slide is just about good to go. What else do we have? Oh yes, the frame. So yeah, again, you can kind of see how it's dried up there, and that's good. That's what we want. At least doing this method with frog lube in the paste, you know, heating up the metal parts, and it's really just down and dirty, wiping it down, getting it all cleaned out of there again. You know, with the frog lube paste, getting it painted on somewhat warm to slightly hot, giving it a chance to bond with the metal. Whatever magic goes on at the molecular chemical level. I'm sure there's some chemical stuff that the chemical gurus out there could explain to us. But yeah, just making sure we get everything coated good, because, you know, protection half done is not what we're after. We want to make sure it's done right. That was something else that, while I haven't always agreed with the methodology, that was something else that my dad taught me too, is, you know, anything worth doing is worth doing right. Now, sometimes OCD people or anal retentive people could overdo that, and that's okay. What works for one may not work for someone else, but I do think that if you're going to take on a job, don't, what do they say? Don't half-ass it, whole-ass it. Seems like I read that somewhere. I'm sure it was a meme. So I'm going to press down this extractor yet again, just to wipe off all the excess paste that's now solidified up. Or I should say, pop it back up. It was down, because again, it has to be down to get the slide off. And as you'll see me hopefully remember here, if I don't stop hitting the camera, it has to be down. So that tab right there is what we're talking about. That's what I was trying to show you when the slide was still on. We're just pushing that down. So it needs to be down when you go to put the slide, before you try to put the slide back on again too. Otherwise the slide will not go back on the firearm. So I think, ooh, look at the shiny plastic with the frog lube on there. So see, it doesn't hurt the plastic. You might need to wipe it off, spend a little bit of time wiping it off of there, but it's not going to hurt it. I feel like I'm starting to talk like Bob Ross now. Not trying to. So yeah, I think we've got the frame done. Now, so we've broken the firearm down. We've shown you how to do that on the Ruger P85 Mark II. Again, principally it's the same, but firearms vary, you know, across, even semi-automatics, revolvers, whatever. Revolvers are pretty much the same, regardless of the revolver, unless you're breaking it all the way down, which you typically wouldn't be. Semi-automatics are generally the same, but they can vary. Like, not all of them have, you know, the need to push down an extractor, for example. So we've talked about breaking it down. We're about to put it back together. We've sprayed it down with solvent to dissolve all the old dusty grease off of it and any gunpowder, carbon, lead residue there may be. We've painted it up with the paste, the protectant from frog lube in this case. And now the last step before we put it back together is I'm going to take some of the liquid frog lube and use this as an actual lubricant on contact points that I typically address. Again, with a lot of firearms, they'll tell you in the manual specifically, or you may see folks recommend things that I may not hear. But you want to find the wear points, and you can typically see wear points by metal showing through any number of ways. You could see wear points. I mean, here down in the slide, for example, where the top of the barrel gets in there, you can kind of see them. And then there's just some general touch points with the metal that are good to hit with lubricant. So what I do with this frog lube is I just get a little bit on my fingertips, and then I get in here and put it where I think it makes sense, also knowing that there's some specific points. So again, this is going to vary from firearm to firearm, but still be somewhat applicable. I'm going to put it where I typically would on all of my firearms. If I miss a spot, I'll get it next time, no biggie, but I try to get the things that I know make most sense. I may even put some here where the slide may or may not make much contact, but make me feel better. Put a little bit here. Again, what we're looking not to do is really get any in or around the firing pin, which in this case we don't have to worry about so much. But I am going to put some, I really try to get some down in the ridge here in the slide that mounts up to the frame, because I know that metal sliding through there can be some rubbing points. So that's just me. If that's a waste of time for someone else, that's great. we all do things a little different, and that's okay. That's what makes us unique. And again, I kind of can see some wear points on here. So I'm just going to make it a point to try to get a little bit more on those. Sorry, you can't see what I'm doing, but again, I'm looking for wear points or potential wear points, and I'm making it a point just to get some in those places. That's all I'm working to do right now. Okay, a little bit more down in this slide, what I call the slide groove. I don't know the technical name for it. Come on, get out of there. There we go. Maybe a little much. So we hope that you've liked this video. It's the first. It's probably going to be a little rough to start. Me hitting the camera doesn't help any, I know. So apologies in advance for that. But if you like what you've seen here, be sure to like the video. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to our channel. As I mentioned, we're just getting started out. Dennis and I are trying to fill out the video thing to see what we might like to do, and quite honestly, what resonates with our audience or our potential audience. And so if you like the video, feel free to like it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you like it well enough, share it out to your friends. Even if they don't have a P85 Mark II, they might find the video entertaining, if nothing else. And we all have an appreciation for firearms, so helps with the community maybe. I'm going to get this thing back together and then we'll wrap it up. You can see on top, and this is not uncommon, but you can see even on this stainless steel barrel that wear on the barrel is not uncommon at all. So yeah, I like to put a little bit on there. Might wipe off in time, but at least I know I've done my part to help at least some. And so the paste that we've put in there that's had time to bond with the metal and that we've wiped off again, of course, we didn't wipe it all off. That was the point of putting it on hot and letting it dry out. That's going to provide a little bit of lubrication, but this liquid lube is really what's going to help. So now we've got the slide. I got it upside down. I'm going to basically reverse what I did to take everything apart, okay? So just keep that in mind. You're reversing what you did to get it apart. So I'm going to insert the barrel kind of this way, since I had to lift up and take it back. I'm going to go back in the exact same, the opposite way. And depends on my angle as to how easy it wants to be going in. Sometimes it's first time, sometimes it takes a little bit. There we go. So now the barrel's back in. I'm going to take my guide rod and recoil spring and I'm going to feed it back in. Again, once I start putting tension on here, I really want to stay a hold of it, because if I let it go, it's going to shoot across the room and then I'm going to be pissed because I've lost my spring potentially. There we go. And for this particular weapon, I want to make sure that extractor's down. You know, we've been playing with it some and cleaning it. I've popped it up again, so we're going to push that down. And now, in theory, my slide should go right back on. So all I'm doing is reversing. So I'm lining up the guides. You can see how they are going in the notches there. And I'm just going to go all the way back. And I'm going to get my slide stop situated, because again, just to move it back around, that is the hole that we're trying to put. So this is the little tab, the little finger, the little arm that you got to get back in there again. And so we want that little finger right there to go into that semicircle slot. So we're backing it up till that semicircle slot is over that lower portion. And then we're going to simply drop the slide stop down and start pushing it through. And it'll go. Just want to make sure the slot and that groove are lined up. And there we go. Now the slide stop is back on. We can confirm that by racking the slide, and we can even Take it off safety for a minute. Of course, it is empty. Take it off safety for a minute just to make it easier. Oh, I know. Guess what we did? Why isn't the hammer cocking even though it's off safe? Well, that's because I have not moved the extractor back up into place yet. And so ideally they would tell you just to shove a magazine back in there, and that certainly does it, pops it right into place. But like I said, I don't have magazines where I clean, so I'm just going to use my middle finger and reach up in there and push it back up. And so now when we rack the slide, you'll see the extractors back into place again. See the tab? So don't forget that while the extractor has to be down to take the slide off and put it back on again, it has to be up in order for the firearm to operate. So now that the extractor's back into place like it should be, I got the safety off and the hammer's back since the slide was back. Now we can just see, yep, seems like it's good. Seems like it's good. So we've got good operation, decocker's working. So that's something you want to do before you get to the range. Before you put ammo in it, is just to make sure the slide's operating. If it's a hammer operated firing system, make sure that the hammer's working, make sure your safety's working, your decocker in this case is working right. Pull the trigger a time or two. You'll know if it's not working right. You won't hear the firing pin, it won't engage. You'll know something's off, the slide's not moving the way it should be. And then the last thing I'm going to do to get my grimy fingerprints off of it and any residue, paste, or liquid is I'm just going to wipe it down one good last time here and before we wrap this up. And so with that, that concludes our first gun cleaning video that happens to be my choice for the first video, which was the Ruger P85 Mark II. I hope that you've liked what you've seen here. I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments. And thanks so much for watching. We'll see you soon.